morning, everyone. Buenos días y bienvenidos. My name is Esme Villarreal, and I'm the very proud president and CEO for your local chamber. We are very excited to start this week with a very special guest as we start our morning with our virtual town hall with the City of Brownsville and, of course, our very special guest, Mayor Trey Mendez. Once again, Mayor, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us.
Of course. It's always an honor to join you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor. I know it's Monday and everyone, of course, is starting their work week. And we're very excited, as I said, to start our week with our mayor and having him, of course, address our constituents of our City of Brownsville and our business community as we speak about the most recent 8th Amendment Declaration of Local Disaster for Public Health Emergency. And before we start our morning and our program, I would like to take the time to thank our leadership, our Brownsville Chamber of Commerce Board of Directors, and of course, our City of Brownsville, the management, and of course, the offices that have been in contact with our office to make sure that we have these platforms and that we educate everyone in our city, especially our business community, of how this specific 8th Amendment Declaration impacts your business. I also want to take the time to thank our city manager, Mr. Noel Bernal, our deputy city manager, Mrs. Ramirez, and also Felipe Romero, which has done a tremendous job communicating with Danielle, our director of marketing and program, to get this done in really less than 24 hours. I know that our mayor, as you know, our elected officials are extremely busy trying to combat this pandemic and again, trying to find ways to continue to move forward as a city, but also doing it very tactfully and very safely as we have reopened for business, and how unfortunately we see an increase in COVID-19 positive cases. So we would love to hear from you. I know our mayor is looking forward to your questions. We invite everyone to share this webinar, either being through Zoom or Facebook Live, as we're now on Facebook Live. We encourage everyone to use the chat and send your questions, and we can go ahead and address this at a later time towards the end of the program. We do have this being recorded, so if you do know of anyone that could benefit from seeing today's webinar, feel welcome to let them know that we're going to be able to share it at a later time via email and of course through our platforms, social media platforms. So do stay connected, do share this information. There's very valuable information that we're going to be discussing today. So without further ado, it is with great pleasure to introduce and welcome once again our Mayor Trey Mendez.
Thanks, Esme. As usual, it's always an honor to take part in any sort of chamber event. Thank you for inviting me. We're in a very, very different time than any of us could have ever expected. This is a really once in a century type of situation. The last time this occurred was 1918, more or less, almost 100 years ago. And it's been, let me tell you, it's been a real learning experience, I think, for everyone. For me personally, it's something that I never could have anticipated, but if I had a choice, I'm glad that I'm here representing the citizens in the City of Brownsville, because I can assure you that every single moment of my life, I think, over the last 3 months, has been somehow related to figuring out ways to continue to move our city forward during this time and really trying to find solutions for everybody. Unfortunately, despite me racking my brain over the last 3 months, there's no answer and there's no correct way to approach any of this. I think that the balance here and what everybody's trying to find is we're trying to make sure that public safety comes first. We want to ensure that our citizens are safe. We want to ensure that everybody is protected and taking precautions to try and protect themselves and their family, while at the same time making sure that our economy moves forward. And let me say that none of the measures we've taken have meant to pick on any particular business or any particular individuals. It is weighing risks and doing the best we can to try and manage this. My personal feeling is that we can operate safely and we can still run our businesses as long as we do so safely. And I think, what does that mean? I think that means that certain business occupancies are going to have to be probably kept lower than they would like for a while until we can control this. And I've always been a believer, and I've conveyed this to our lawmakers and other people, is that rather than spending a lot of money on things that may not prove that effective over the long term, I think we need to try and spend some more money on containing the virus itself. Until we are able to actually contain the virus and contain the spread, all sorts of monies that are being spent out there may end up being, just temporary band-aids. And so until we can actually take control of this, then I think we can move forward and move forward closer to what used to be normal. But I think that a big problem that we've had here recently was the reopening, the way that the reopening occurred. I was surprised initially at the opening not being more aggressive. I actually thought that it would be a lot more aggressive than it was. I thought that the phased approach was good. I just don't think that the phased approach parameters and qualifications were necessarily followed. We really are suffering a lot due to not being able to wear coverings, not being able to lower occupancies. But I think now that we've scaled it back, we should start to hopefully see some results. Facial coverings are the easiest thing we could possibly do, I think. And it is a personal responsibility thing. That's what it comes down to ultimately. But personal safety and protecting others should not be a question. It should be a very easy answer, especially when it's just, just covering yourself and trying to take precautions. But nonetheless, like I said, I do believe we can be safe, and I do believe we can still operate moving forward, and I'm going to do my best to continue to do that. The City Commission certainly is weighing all the data and trying to take calculated risks when it comes to certain things, and also just doing what it needs to do to keep people safe. And the last thing I want is to have another shutdown, but then after that is another one after that. So we need to be cautious. We need to make sure that we try and heed the guidelines from the CDC, from our elected officials, definitely from the medical professionals who know this best. And we're all in this together, and we need to show each other that we care. And the commission and I certainly, we're trying to lead as best we can in these very difficult times.
Thank you, Mayor. And I know, and perhaps you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I am making the assumption that the reason why this Eighth Amendment declaration was done, it leads because of the actual high numbers that we've seen in the past 2-3 weeks. Based on the actual declaration, you state that the hospitalizations increased by 1,300% capacity. I can't even pronounce that because it really I'm taken aback simply to see the numbers. I personally, during this weekend, I now know of more people that are now have tested positive for COVID-19. So we used to hear this at New York, that Florida, now it's Texas. And it's really hitting home. I think that by now everyone knows of someone that unfortunately is still fighting that battle with COVID-19. We do know of loved ones that have passed due to COVID-19. And this speaks of the initiative of course, on your end as elected officials, our commissioners as well, and of course our city management, to take this action that of course impacts our businesses. We at the Chamber, as we release this information signed by you on the 29th of June and effective on the 30th of June, we received many calls that they had a concern in regards to the amendment. And overall, I think that it's more of a perception and the interpretation of course, the amendment. So with that said, Mayor, before we go into the actual amendment, I know that I want to make sure that we address this as we began. We heard it, we see it on social media often. I know our city is very aggressive. In fact, our city of Brownsville has been the most aggressive city in the lower Rio Grande Valley by implementing the drive-thru testing at the sports park, which we know now you guys are now serving on Saturdays because we have such a high number, and that is important to share. And then also, I do want to share as well that our City of Brownsville is also assisting by providing tests for free if those constituents or citizens of Brownsville do not have an insurance. I think that's very important that our businesses also share that with their employees. but we heard that our hospitals have reached its occupancy. Could you please speak about that before we move into the amendment?
Sure, absolutely. To address the drive-through, I think it's really important to talk about that because you're right. The city of Brownsville has been very aggressive and very innovative in the way that it's tried to approach this. And what I can say is in late March, when this first happened, the original declaration was issued on March the 17th. We initiated our emergency operations center the next day. And within a few days, it became apparent that we were going to have to take more aggressive measures. So what I did was, taking a page from other places around the world. I saw what South Korea did. I saw what other countries were doing, and I asked our city to initiate drive-thru testing and do it as quickly as possible. And I'm happy to say within 4 days we had it up and running. And we were lucky enough to partner with a provider who had the supplies available. We had that up and running very quickly. And thus far, we've tested over 6,000 people. And we also felt that it was important. And this was before we even knew we'd be reimbursed for any of this. But I felt it was also important, and so did the commission, that those individuals who could not afford to test would be able to test. And unfortunately, because supplies were limited, and they still are, they're even more limited now than they were before. But because of that, we had to limit it to those individuals who were presenting with symptoms or met certain guidelines. And even then, we've had 6,000 plus, and we've had over 1,000 individuals that have tested positive through the drive-thru initiative. So when you think about it, it's been very effective in identifying those that have been sick. I think it's actually helped our numbers and helped contain the spread significantly. But also, it kept those 6,000 people that are testing off the street and away from others. Theoretically, right? Because those individuals that are testing are instructed that they should shelter at home, quarantine at home while they get their results. I know some individuals don't comply, but let's focus on the positive. And the vast majority of individuals who test do listen and do stay at home, which has helped us contain the spread significantly. Unfortunately, we do find ourselves in a situation where our hospitals are at capacity. Our ICUs are at capacity. The hospitals have done their best to shift and try and change their operations and open up more units and more rooms. Let me tell you, they've done a fantastic job trying to cope with this. This is something that I've seen certain individuals say, well, why weren't the hospitals prepared? Let me tell you, the hospitals only have a certain amount of space. So this hit us really quickly. We had pretty much succeeded in flattening the curve once we were able to put shelter in place measures in. But once we lost the ability to put those measures in place, and once we had to cede local control to the governor on some of these initiatives, we saw the numbers slowly start to rise. And Memorial Day weekend, I think, was a real point where 10 days to 2 weeks after Memorial Day weekend is when we really started to see this spiral out of control. And now our hospitals are, like I said, their ICUs are well over capacity. The ERs are over capacity. They have very limited space in the hospital itself that they're trying to convert to try and take in more patients. But it is a very dire situation for the hospitals. Just all you have to do is look around, look at Facebook, look at the stories, and you'll hear from various medical professionals that are telling the story from the front lines, and it's very serious. And what's really most serious, and this is important for us to talk about, is the individuals that are coming into the hospital. Not only is there more people coming into the hospital, but the people that are coming into the hospital are coming in sicker. So whereas maybe a month ago they'd come in, some of them obviously were in a position or in a condition where they had to stay, but some of them were being released as well. Now what we're seeing is the individuals that are arriving very sick. And the average length of stay right now for both hospitals is between 10 to 14 days. So when we hit capacity last week, it became a real critical issue because those individuals that are in the hospital are not going to be leaving for 10 to 14 days. And God willing, they leave themselves physically. But there is an increased number of individuals that have passed away at the hospitals over the last 2 weeks, and that's very concerning as well. But when you have the hospitals full, you have individuals that aren't going to leave anytime soon, and then you have a lot of really sick people knocking at the door, there's just nowhere for us to be able to put those individuals. And that's a concern. And I know the hospitals are trying to do their best to open up other units, maybe convert other units to COVID units, which they're working on very quickly. And I have to give them credit. I speak to them at least twice a week. Lately, probably over the last 10 days, I've probably spoken to them every day. But I know that they're running on fumes. The providers are running on fumes. The doctors are overworked, stressed, but they're doing all this for us. So we have to show them love and show them that we can do our part. And our part is taking the precautions that are necessary to contain the spread.
Mayor, and with that said, we've heard and we saw, I've read on Facebook, I haven't seen an official press release of any sort, but what I've read during the weekend is that our governor has sent healthcare professionals such as nurses from throughout the nation to come down, in addition to having more ambulances coming down. Is this correct? And how is Brownsville receiving aid from the government?
Yes, that is absolutely correct. And it was really a coalition with the county and our local medical officials that requested additional resources from the state. And thankfully, those requests were granted. And we've seen several medical professionals. I think there was a breakdown in the newspaper either yesterday or today. I read it online yesterday, so I'm not sure if it was maybe going to be printed today, but it talks about the actual numbers for each facility. I didn't memorize those, I'm sorry, but it is available. And I know that our local hospitals did get several nurses, respiratory technicians, and ambulances, which is very helpful because, like I said, the medical providers, the nurses, the techs, the doctors, they were working double shifts. They were working, consecutive days, covering for coworkers that were sick, and they were really tired. And these reinforcements certainly helped, and I'm glad to have it. And we have requested more, so let's see if we can do that. And then I know that we're also trying. I was on a call on 4th of July, 9 p.m. with the county judge and both CEOs of the hospitals and some other individuals that we were discussing additional facilities and how we could possibly maybe increase bed capacity with through other facilities. That may not be in Brownsville, but it may be somewhere in the valley, and it's meant to address our patients as well. But I know that we had met with the state about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago to try and look for additional facilities when that time came. But unfortunately, the city did not have the facilities that met the state requirements for that. So now we're still looking, and it is something that will happen. I can't give you a timeline, but it is something that's being worked on.
And that was my next question in regards to an additional facility. Should, of course, now knowing that we've reached our capacity at both of our hospitals. Last I heard, one of them, Valley Baptist Medical Center, I think it was the Brownsville Herald as well, said that it was 101% of its capacity. And I'm sure our friends at Valley Region are going through the same. Is there, and I know you mentioned we're not there yet, but as we plan for the future, knowing that we continue to see an increase in positive cases, is there a plan to possibly use one of our facilities? And I know in New York, they possibly use hotels and many other areas. We pray and hope that this doesn't happen in our city, Mayor, but should it happen, are we already working on a plan to?
Yes, yeah, I just spoke to that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're talking about that, and plans are being developed. Like I said, the facility may not be in Brownsville, but those discussions are happening. They're happening very quickly. So yes.
Thank you. We appreciate that. Now, Mayor, as we move forward in regards to the 8th Amendment, as I mentioned to you earlier, we've received multiple calls, and I know our number one priority for our city is to flatten the curve, and the priority is the well-being of our citizens of Brownsville. And but we do also understand that our business community is going through very difficult times, as everyone as a whole is. But specifically, we've received calls from our businesses concerned about the future of their business through the pandemic, knowing that we are at various different capacities on your industry, based on the industry, knowing that now it is required to wear a mask. Mayor, what is your message to these businesses that continuously reach out to the chamber, and of course we as a chamber advocating for them and addressing their concerns? What is the message from you and of course our commission to our businesses to continue to remain patient. And this is a very difficult, right, time, and patience may not be the proper word, but they are struggling. They're suffering. I know you understand this as you as an entrepreneur having your own business, too, of course, your law firm and of course your restaurant. What is the message of hope for these businesses to remain strong and to continue to practice the social CDC guidelines? We know that you are very pro-business in our cities, and we know that our number one priority is to continue to have Brownsville bloom and grow, but there's a process right now in place. Sir, what is your message to them?
Well, I do want them to understand that their situation is not unique. This is something that's happening across the country, across the world, certainly across the state. And every individual has a role to play in this, and their role is to try and take as many precautions as they can. But that doesn't mean business has to be closed. If we operate safely, then businesses should be able to operate at a certain capacity, right? We know that individuals having close contact with each other for a prolonged period of time is what spreads this virus. So if you're in retail, if you're in a restaurant industry, we encourage you to do drive-through. We encourage you to do pickup. We encourage you to do curbside as much as you can, and that means shifting your business model. And this pandemic has shown us that we need to change. We need to adapt, and we need to be innovative. I can say that at my business, at my law firm, for example, I'm doing a lot of meetings virtually. I've learned how to use Zoom now, and something we didn't know how to do 3 months ago, but we're operating as best we can with the technology that we have. And thankfully, the technology that we have allows us to continue to communicate and continue to operate as a law firm. But also, for example, as a restaurant, Dodici, we've shifted our model to more. We've gone with an in-house delivery service. So we've created a delivery service. We're using technology to use social media to have ways that individuals can order online straight from their phone. They can do it on our website. We've also increased our ability to do curbside and pickup. So all those things are things that we had to do, because if we would have just tried to keep going the old way, it wasn't gonna work. So businesses are gonna have to adapt. They're gonna have to innovate. They're gonna have to use technology to their advantage. There's some businesses possibly that cannot. I can't think of some off the top of my head, but obviously let's just say manufacturing. Well, those are essential businesses. They're still allowed to operate, but particularly retail and restaurants, I think, are the ones that are really suffering. And retail, I know individuals that have retail businesses, and they've shifted their models to online. They're doing as much as they can on social media, trying to reach an audience that may be at home, but still needs things to do. And we've seen grocery stores do more curbside as well. So I think there's definitely a way to do it. You just have to look into how you can do it. And unfortunately, like I said, we're all in the same position. A lot of business, especially small business, is at risk here. And unfortunately, just like individuals that go into the hospital, not everybody's going to make it. And that's a sad reality. The same thing here. Unfortunately, not every small business is going to be able to survive this, but just do the best you can to try and innovate and try and change with the times, and keep your head up, stay positive, and make sure you reach your clients and you engage with your clientele.
Mayor, thank you for that. Now, in regards to the 8th Amendment, as you just mentioned, the retailers, of course, and that involves our shopping malls. I do see that part of the amendment states that employees must wear gloves and facial coverings. Would you please speak more about that?
Sure. Any individuals that are interacting with the public, if you're interacting with the public, if let's just say you're a clothing store and you have individuals that are coming to pick up, you should have a face mask on. You should have gloves. We don't want any sort of contamination. And restaurants especially, if there's any restaurants where individuals are not wearing face masks or gloves, they should get a visit from somebody, because that's just the easiest thing you can do to stay safe. Obviously disinfect, clean the tables after sittings. Things like this are in the governor's plan to reopen Texas. But as far as the gloves and the facial coverings, like I said, person-to-person contact in a close proximity is what spreads this. All the health experts agree on that. So we're trying to limit that as much as we can. And you have to understand, as a city, our job is to minimize risk and to protect our citizens. So that's what we felt we needed to do when it comes to business and retail, to protect those that are consuming. So definitely, if you're interacting with the public, face mask and gloves.
Thank you, sir. Now, as I told you before we started our conversation this morning, we've received calls and I speak on behalf of some of the party halls that have contacted the local chamber, and more of a question is more of a request to, as we move forward with this pandemic, they're asking for our leadership to consider that specific industry as known and listed on this 8th Amendment states that the actual bingo halls and the bowling alleys can continue to operate up to 50% of their capacity. Their request, and I'm speaking on behalf of multiple that have reached out to me, they're asking to please consider multiple things that they mentioned to me, because we've been on the phone for hours, to be honest with you. So this specific industry is asking for your help, and of course our elected officials, to consider them being able to open for business at a 50% capacity, or whatever you consider would be best. I understand that, we do know that COVID-19 is spread rapidly, and of course in an enclosed area, it's so much easier.
Right, and I understand their request, and I certainly sympathize with it. But like I said earlier, we're in this together, and everybody has a part. So when you have individuals in close contact, especially in a confined space, that's going to be what spreads this. And the governor, in his latest declaration, and I would ask that everybody look at that. He states that people should not be in groups larger than 10. So the governor himself is limiting groups to 10. So I certainly am not going to make an exception for party place. I cannot. I don't think it's safe. And I mean, I'm sorry. That's all I can say. I'm sorry, but we can't make exceptions just for one industry. We closed bingo halls for months, and I'm sure those individuals were upset at us as well. We had to close the flea markets as well. This is not something that I'm happy to do or something I'm proud to do, but when we have a situation like we have now, where the virus has, in a way, kind of started to spin out of control and very difficult to contain, we see the community spread percentage, off the charts. It's really something that we need to rein in as much as we can. And unfortunately, places that have a lot of people together, not wearing facial coverings in close proximity for a period of time, is something that we have to limit. And unfortunately, at this time, social gatherings and events are one of those things. So that's all I can say at this point.
Mayor, thank you. In regards to how we are enforcing these laws and orders, how are peace officers and our health department addressing these matters to specific businesses? I know one of the actual listed, like you mentioned previously, our Governor Abbott, stated that it is prohibited to have gatherings of 10 people or more. How are we as a city enforcing these laws, as we just had 4th of July this weekend, and we do know, and we saw, of course, gatherings at homes perhaps, and families getting together as a typical tradition to do a barbecue, right? And we did see that many went to of course, to the island. How are we as a city enforcing these laws? And I know that our #1 priority is to protect our citizens, and we're not here as a city to cite them. I want to make sure that you also talk about this, because we've received calls of businesses that mentioned they're just being cited, but there is a process in place. Can you talk more about it, please?
Sure. A large part of this is enforcement and awareness. So whenever we adopt new orders or new guidelines, our health department takes it upon itself to go ahead and visit as many businesses as they can to make them aware of the new requirements. They give them a day or two to kind of shift and get into compliance. But the enforcement certainly is a big issue. And a lot of it is having individuals report this. Our enforcement officers can't be in every single business at all hours of the day. And our police officers can't either. They're trying to do their best to keep us safe as well. But like I said, awareness, education, and the enforcement part is in large part relying on individuals reporting this. So if you see something, report it. If you see anything that's happening contrary to what's been put in place either by the governor or the city, please report it, let us know, and we will be out there and we will enforce it.
Mayor, we also saw on social media platforms from our city that the city is asking for businesses to contact 911 if they do encounter any situations in which a citizen, a client, walks in and does not want to abide with a mandatory order of wearing a facial mask. What should a business do if they're faced with this situation?
Well, as a business, I mean, they're partly responsible to enforce this as well, right? They can't just wash their hands of it. I think that if you're a business and somebody doesn't want to comply, it's incumbent upon you to ask those individuals to leave. If they cause a scene, certainly call the police. We've had that happen a few times. So you certainly don't want to get into any sort of physical altercation with anybody. If they're being uncooperative, then call 911, call the police, and have them enforce this, because we don't want anybody to be unsafe when it comes to this, but we also expect businesses to also let us know and enforce some of these things for themselves.
Thank you, sir. I do have questions coming in. This comes from Mr. Mondragon, and it states, I would like to know what measures the city's taking in order to protect law-abiding citizens from citizens that keep going to the beaches or parks without taking protective measures.
Well, that's a difficult question, right? What I would ask Mr. Mondragon if he has any suggestions, right? I mean, what is the city doing to protect these individuals? We're asking everybody to wear facial coverings. We're asking people to stay at home unless they're unable to leave. That's really the best I can say, unless he has any particular suggestions. I mean, I'm all ears, but I don't see how we can necessarily take measures in particular to individuals that are returning from the island. That's a very difficult, I mean, that's almost impossible to do, but if he has any suggestions, by all means, please send them to me and I'll pass them along. But for now, a lot of this, like I said, is everybody has a part, everybody has a role. We certainly made it very clear that we did not want individuals going to South Padre Island. There's individuals that are not listening, and you know, those individuals at some point will probably have a family member that gets ill, or they themselves will get sick, and maybe at that point they'll learn the seriousness of this. But a lot of the individuals that are asymptomatic are also contributing to spread. It's a community-wide effort, and it's a community-wide responsibility.
Thank you, Mayor. I have another question coming from our Facebook audience. It states, is there any indication that the city, county, or state will revert back to the mandatory shelter in place, and what would that time frame look like?
I can't answer in the time frame. A lot of this depends on us and how the numbers look. The governor himself did state that if the positivity rate across the state doubled, then he would consider a statewide shelter in place. At that point in time, the positivity rate was around 10%. Since then, it's gone to about 14-15%. So if it continues to tick up, then it's not unrealistic to think that may happen by the governor. As a city, we're going to continue to monitor that. We have considered it. We have a curfew in place now, as I hope people know about that. That limits some of the mobility, but closing bars, I think, helps. Reducing occupancy certainly helps. Putting some of the measures in place that we did as a city certainly helps. We put in the facial covering mandate before the governor. We had also reduced capacity on some social gatherings before the governor as well. And I'm glad that he also initiated it statewide. That made it easier for us to enforce too. But, you know, and sometimes when the governor says it, some individuals tend to take it more seriously. So that certainly helped. But as far as the governor himself, I think if that positivity rate hits 20%, he may do it. But as a city, we're going to continue to monitor the numbers, and if it becomes something that's necessary, we'll do it. I can't give a time frame.
Thank you, sir. I have many questions to address, and I know we may be short on time here, but This comes from Mr. Mireles, and it states, as far as financial relief and aid from the federal government for small businesses, how important is it for residents and business owners to make sure they participate and encourage people to participate in the census to help in situations like this in the future?
Well, the census certainly is extremely important. There's been an extension of time for the census. The city had a lot of plans to do some initiatives that required home-to-home visits and other personal contact. That's since been scaled back, but we still continue with mail-outs, with a lot of social media, with promotions. So we're doing the best we can, and we are scaling that up. This kind of, reverting back a little bit on certain things didn't help, but we're continuing those efforts. And I've been on so many meetings involving the census lately. I can tell you that our goal is to go to 80%. We're almost at about 51% right now, which is higher than the other cities in Cameron County. So I'm proud of us for that, but we still have a long way to go. And just keep spreading the word and keep encouraging individuals to fill that out. It's extremely important for the next 10 years. So the next 10 years are going to be dependent on the results of that. So please encourage everybody to fill it out.
Thank you. Mayor, also there's a comment question through Facebook, and it states, what is the plan for schools tentatively starting in August? As you may know, and I read it through Facebook this weekend, there was a group of educators that gathered together in the planning of the opening in August for the school year. And unfortunately, these educators were all, one of the educators perhaps, or several, I don't know, were carriers of COVID-19, and all these educators now are positive. What are your thoughts in regards to the opening of schools in August?
I'm personally not a proponent of opening schools in August. I'm not a BISD official though, so I'm not the person to ask on that. But my personal opinion, if that's what they're asking, I'm not a proponent of opening schools. Schools are certainly a big risk factor when it comes to spreading this. And we've seen other school districts. We saw Texas Southmost College over the weekend announce that they were not gonna have in-person classes for the rest of the year. They announced that their next semester is gonna be virtual only, which I applaud them for taking the lead on that. I'm hoping that other school districts do the same thing, and I really hope that BISD does that. From everything we're seeing, it doesn't look like it's anything that's going to be contained within the next month to where people can feel safe operating and going back to school. You're talking about 40,000 students and several thousand other employees. It doesn't make any sense to open up, quite honestly.
Thank you, sir. We do have many feedback coming through, through our Zoom chat and also through Facebook. But I have a question here, and it comes from one of our small business owners from a party hall, and it states that his business has been closed since March, and respectfully mentions that he believes that it doesn't make any sense that the bigger areas can be opened, where in his particular business he has more control in regards to his facility. His concern as a party hall is, again, going back to what I previously mentioned, the request to perhaps allow them, and again, I know you have already addressed this question, but I want to make sure that I addressed it again as it continuously comes in as a question in our chat. Just respectfully, again, addressing you to consider their party halls as they have full control and their capacity doesn't exceed 40 in the same facility. Also, sir, I have, and you give me one quick second here. We have someone that, states that you have just mentioned how we're all in this together, yet unfortunately she does see how many are ignoring the warnings and of course about social distancing. Unfortunately, and we send our condolences to this citizen. She just lost her mom this Sunday due to COVID, and her husband and son are on the front lines as they're part of in the medical field, and she's worried every day, and she's asking everyone to please consider to stay home and practice social distance. But she states here the following: don't people understand that in order for people to keep their jobs or businesses have to remain open, and for that to happen we have to flatten the curve? Again, it goes back to your message, how our city is not against the reopening of businesses, but doing it in a very responsible way to move forward and flatten the curve. I think this is the time that we as a community come together and support more than ever our small businesses, but also it's an opportunity to think outside the box, to get more creative and to readjust our program of work. You know, on behalf of our chamber, we want to extend our condolences to this citizen. We're sorry for your loss, ma'am. And our mayor, of course, if you have any words for her.
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's been a lot of people lose their lives, and we've had a lot of deaths over the last couple of weeks, and it's certainly not something we wanted to see. And this is a situation that we all wanted to avoid. And this is where it's a very serious issue, and this is what can happen. And to that individual, I'm so sorry for your loss. It certainly doesn't make this any easier as mayor to be in this position. I'm trying to avoid that, and every time I hear about something like that, it makes me want to work harder and really try and find a way to get the message across. But she's right. Some individuals just haven't done their part.
You know, it is very difficult, because before we started today's conversation, for those, you know, we always have time to speak to our mayor beforehand. And, you know, we were, as I mentioned to you, Mayor, we were hearing it and seeing on the news that it was New York, and then Florida, and then now it's the Valley, and now it's closer to home. And as I mentioned to you, sir, earlier this weekend, I've heard of so many friends that unfortunately have tested, you know, positive for COVID-19. And it truly breaks our heart now, because it's closer to home. It is a reality. And for those that believe that this was not a reality, it is our reality. And we need to make sure that we do our social responsibility, as we all have a social responsibility, and that we wear our masks, and that we, you know, we practice social distance, and that we don't have to go out, don't go out. Our businesses have now been more creative. Now you can do curbside pickup. You can go ahead and order. You can go ahead and have them delivered to your home. We can continue to support our businesses, because we do want to continue to support our businesses. In fact, there's so many resources available right now that we as a chamber, in collaboration with the City of Brownsville, our Greater Brownsville Census Corporation, and the Brownsville Community Improvement Corporation, are working together to really educate these businesses. We've conducted, sir, more than 5,000 calls to over hundreds of businesses, and we hear their frustration. We hear that they're going through financial hardships. But I also need, I also want to stress the importance that we also need to focus on the good out of the bad. You know, do take advantage of the resources. Do know that our state, you know, our city, our EDCs, everyone's working together. I think that, you know, what this has brought us, what this pandemic has brought is that we're stronger than ever. We're resilient, and it shows with how everyone has collaborated together. I know our city's fighting hunger. I know our nonprofits are working together to deliver goods to those, you know, families, as we are still considered one of the poorest cities in our nation. We continue to fight hunger. We continue to provide tests, and, you know, we wanted to continue to provide resources for businesses. Now, Mayor, is there anything aside from the known resources that we have that the City of Brownsville is doing to assist these businesses that unfortunately don't apply for a PPP or for an EIDL loan? Is there anything that you would like to mention at this time for those businesses that unfortunately have not received any resources to sustain their businesses during this pandemic?
Well, the city and the county were not eligible for certain federal funding. For example, Hidalgo County, because they're over 500,000 as a county, they had access to additional funding. We didn't have access to that funding, but I know that we did get some funding here recently that we're trying to develop plans for small business. BCIC has already implemented some of that. I know GBIC has considered it as well, but it's tough. It's really hard. The hardest thing is you don't want to just give money away for the sake of giving money away. You want to make sure that it's going to be sustainable, and that you try and spend it wisely in trying to encourage certain things for a business, or trying to help them implement something that's going to be sustainable for them. But the programs that are in place through the city are through BCIC at this point. But the city did receive some funding, and I've asked them to look into ways to help small business more.
Thank you. Now, we do have 3 more questions before. I know that you have other engagements, and we're really appreciative of your time. So I have someone mentioning here that if they know someone that has tested positive and they were informed to quarantine as known for those 14 days, but they do know that this specific person is out at SPI or going to places, in public places, can they report this person? And if so, how? What is the process?
Report them to the health department. Look it up, Google health department for Brownsville, and you'll get the number.
Sir, I have a request coming from nonprofits, and it states, Mayor Trey, are you in communication with our state reps and congressmen regarding essential service workers for the second stimulus? And in addition, will homeless shelters workers such as Good Neighbor Settlement House and Sunshine Haven Hospice qualify for hazard pay?
I don't know. I don't know anything about hazard pay. I'm sorry. I don't know enough about hazard pay when it comes to that. We did get some funding here recently for homeless initiatives, so we're working on that as well. That came in maybe notice of it came in maybe about 2 weeks ago, and I'm having a meeting on that later today. So as far as the funding for homeless initiatives, we have some, but I'm sorry, I don't have an answer to the hazard pay question.
Thank you, sir. And again, for everyone that has questions, we'll be more than happy to address them at a later time and send them and email them to our mayor. And then Mayor, should it be fine with you, once we have an update, we can go ahead and provide answers to those questions as well, so we can communicate, with those businesses that may have questions. Also, lastly, I have a question in regards to the amendment, and it states, if every retail should be wearing gloves, does that mean that every HEB, Walmart, etc. employee should wear gloves? And if so, how often are they changed to avoid a worse spread?
That applies it to everybody, so they definitely should be wearing gloves. I can't answer the question on how often they should be changed, but they definitely all should be wearing gloves and facial coverings as well.
I just had one last question really quick, Mayor. What about dance studios for children? Are they allowed to operate? That was the last question that just came in.
I'm sorry?
Dance studios, sir, are they allowed to operate for children?
I'm not aware, Esme, I'm sorry. If I got a question about every single type of business, I wouldn't be able to answer it. As far as dance studios, I'm sorry, I really don't know the answer to that. I would just advise you to look at the city orders, read through them. I'm not aware of anything in particular. I can tell you the city orders have nothing in particular in regard to dance studios. You may want to look for clarification from the governor's order.
Yes, and at this time, we encourage everyone to, now that we have some more questions, we can address them, and we'll be more than glad to communicate with the governor's office. We, as I mentioned earlier, we have the COVID-19 Rapid Response Small Business Program. We have a total of 9 persons, including myself, assisting businesses. So we'll make sure that we address this and we can follow up. We'll go ahead and contact the governor's office. I do ask for everyone to be patient. We do know that it takes a while to connect with the governor's office, as we have thousands of Texans reaching out for assistance regarding the governor's phase 3 reopening of Texas and other ordinances and orders right now in place. Mayor, before we adjourn, we want to thank you for your leadership. We want to thank you for your devotion, and we know that you truly invested in your community. We appreciate all that you do. Do know that the chamber is here to support you, and we can't stress enough the importance of being here for our city and our business community. We want to thank, of course, our elected officials, our commissioners. I know they're working hard within their districts to be the voice for the business community and overall for the citizens of our city. And again, on behalf of the Brownsville Chamber of Commerce leadership, we thank you. Sir, is there any final thoughts before we adjourn today's virtual town hall?
Just really quickly on the question about child dance studios, the governor's recent orders limit certain gatherings to 10 or more. There is some exceptions. If you refer back to GA 28, there's exceptions under number 1, 2, and 4 as far as occupancy. Child dance studios are not in there, so I would assume that they're not going to be exempt from this requirement. Last words, the 3 easiest things we've asked everybody to do from day one has been wear facial covering, wash your hands, keep good hygiene, and stay away from others. And those are 3 very, very easy things. For some reason, however, not everybody's been able to do that. And I would just ask you to please do your best to stay home as much as possible. Take precautions. We are, like we said earlier, I don't want to have another shutdown. I don't want to have a third shutdown. I don't want to have a second one, much less a third one, right? I'm a proponent of trying to keep businesses open as much as possible with lower occupancies as safely as possible. There's some businesses, unfortunately, that are more risks than others, right? And we're not picking on those businesses at all. It's just an unfortunate situation at this point. I mean, I'm sure bar owners are devastated that they've been closed, but the quicker everybody can get through this, the quicker we can open up and try and move on. It's not going to be fast. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be something that will happen overnight, and we certainly won't get back to 100% of the way things were before. This is, for lack of a better term, a new normal that we're going to have to get used to for some time. And we are all in it together. We are. And this is not just something unique to Brownsville. Like I said earlier, it's everybody in the state, everybody in the country, and most people across the world. So, just pray that we can all get through this. Pray for the safety of yourself and your loved ones. Pray that they don't get sick enough to have to go into a hospital. And if they do, just pray that they get better as soon as possible. And I can say thank you to all healthcare workers. Thank you to everybody out there on the front lines. Thank you to everybody that's staying open and providing services to our community. As mayor, and I think I speak for the city commission when I say this, everything that we do with the entire community in mind, and all the decisions we make are based on what we feel is best. So please understand that this is very difficult for everyone, and we're doing the best that we can. And I personally have been doing this, full time for about 3 months, and I don't intend to stop now. So thank you to everybody for their support and their understanding. And I'm just going to keep doing as much as I can, and I hope that you do too. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. And again, we're very grateful for your leadership. We will continue to keep you and, of course, our leadership in prayers, and our frontline employees. Do know that we have a genuine appreciation for all that you do, and we do know that your mindset is, of course, very in support of businesses. But again, we all have this social responsibility to do the best for each other and support each other. So, sir, we thank you for your time today, and again, we wish you to continue to support. We know that we have your support for businesses, and we please take the chamber as a resource to communicate directly with our business community. And we'll make sure that we send all other questions that we were not, able to address this morning due to time, and we'll send them your way. And we have the responsibility to answer those questions to our businesses. So do expect an answer at a later time. And I know it's going to take a little while. We do know that you're very busy. But with that said, I'll go ahead and forward that information to you. I think we have like 1 or 2 more questions that we were not able to address. So we wish you the very best today. And of course, count on your chamber for anything. Have a great day.
Thanks, Esme. I would just say one last thing is, contrary to popular belief, I don't have the answer to every single question. So I hope people understand that, but I'll do my best to answer whatever I can.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate that. Have a great day.